especially young filmmakers, it just takes time.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you're bad.
Yeah.
It just takes time. Dude, like there's sometimes that I'll be editing something and it just doesn't quite work. And I would go to bed and I would wake up in the middle of the night with an idea to how to fix it.
Yeah.
And then like the next day I go boom, 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 do it. Perfect.
Exactly.
Or like I would be playing something, especially in the edit, like there's a beautiful technique about mixing dialogue lines with each other, especially when they're not from the same take or you're interrupting something to trim something out. And it's funny how like 5 years ago, I would edit things like that and it will be jumpy, it will be choppy. Now it's like I can finesse it.
And you can't even tell probably. It's just,
And the funny thing is there are moments that I just look at the waveform and I know, okay, that is going to jump there and all I need to do is like trim this and trim this. And if I do this and this, I know it's going to work with the little keyframes and the crossfades and stuff. And it's interesting. So I want young filmmakers to remember it just takes time. It doesn't mean that you suck. It doesn't mean that you don't have what it takes. It's just like a tree. Like a tree, some big, large tree, it takes 30, 40 years for them to get that size. You might be at the acorn, like at the little seed moment, especially if you're 21 and you just came out of college and you're like trying to do this for a living. We need to remember like Spielberg, James Cameron, all of those people, they have been doing it for 30, 40 years. That's why they're so good at it. So in your case, you have already made several features and now you're getting ready to do something bigger. What do you think that process is going to be? How are you thinking about that? And maybe let's talk a little bit about the business side of things, like going and pitching to investors and like trying to get funding and what does it really take to be able to raise money to make like a quote unquote real like budget movie?
Well, that's always the question, and there's so many paths, especially now in terms of fundraising. There's like, you know, from the low budget, I always say if you're doing like a no budget film and you're your own crew, okay, so your savings are a credit card. If you're up to a micro budget level, which is, I would say like anywhere from like $10,000 to $100,000 or whatever, then you're probably doing crowdfunding, maybe crowd equity, maybe some private investors. Once you get above, you know, $250,000 or something, you're gonna need to get investors generally that have more than a few $1,000s. Like on a $50,000 movie, maybe you find 10 people with $5,000. And they're investing not because they think they're necessarily gonna make any money, but they just wanna be part of a cool project. Once you get to that higher budget level, at least from what I've seen from all my friends and colleagues who've done, you know, much larger films than my features, you know, there's a formula in terms of, okay, we have to cast certain actors and those have a certain amount of value in foreign markets. And then once those actors give us sort of their, you know, letter of intent or whatever it is, we can go to a financier. And if we raise our first money or we come in, the first money is always a big thing. Like if someone needs $1 million, they might have 3 investors, but the first one's always going to be the hardest. Like get that first $100,000, $200,000. Then once it's a moving train, you can get other people on board. Really the way that I look at it is, so you talked about like business and wanting to get into that. So like I'm very business minded, more with, not always with my films though. So like I'm weird like that because like I'm very, very entrepreneurial. I've always been that way. But when I make films, I've made, I don't know if it's the mistake, but I think of them very much as like a pure art form where like I don't want to make a film because I just think it's going to make a lot of money or because it probably won't, you know, if I go in with that intention. How I want to even finance my films plays into my own kind of philosophy on business. So one thing that I really want to do moving forward and that I've done so far, because my films have been so low budget, that I've just self-financed everything. Now that I have, you know, a couple of different businesses that thankfully are growing, you know, pretty well and in a measurable and predictable way, I can actually say if I want to keep self-financing my films, so long as my businesses keep growing, my movies will keep growing, right? So like if my production company grows in the next 10 years, if it's making 10 times the revenue it is now, I could break off a much bigger chunk to finance a movie, you know, at that point. And to me, that is more that's very unusual. And most people say like, don't invest in your own movies and like always get someone else's money. For me, it's about like, if I'm gonna spend all the time and all the effort to find investors, to create pitch decks, to pitch to people, to ask for money, to try to invest in movies, maybe they work, maybe they don't, maybe I have to find new investors the next time. Maybe I could take all of those resources and put them into building a business that will generate cash flow predictably, and then I don't have to ever ask anyone to finance my film. Or at the very least, I have the first money in already myself. So if I do want to go to a traditional investor, I'm not starting from zero. I might say, okay, we're doing the $1 million film. I want to put in like the first whatever percentage. So that's my goal. 10 years from now, I hope I'm doing all this exact same things I'm doing now. They've just scaled up a little bit bigger. So I'm able to, be a little bit more ambitious in terms of bigger canvases and going after certain talent and certain actors. But for better, for worse, I don't know if it's a good strategy, so I'm not advising anyone to take that path, but for better, for worse, like I'm just kind of wired in that way where I want to kind of own it from end to end. I want to have the financing, have the production, have distribution. Even on the distribution side, that's why I focus so much on audience building and building up. I have about 70,000 people on a newsletter now. Probably will hit 100 this year. It's growing at about 3,000 to 5,000 a month. Wow. And like that's really, really important to me because that's a cornerstone of my business and my filmmaking career. So I do things in a very roundabout way. Whether or not it will pan out the way I hope it will is anyone's guess, but I'm just trying to be true to my own instincts, and that's all you can do, because it's always a gamble and there's no one real way to do any of this.
Yeah, I think it all depends on your goals.
Yeah.
So it seems like your goals for your films is to be able to do them on your own terms and do the projects that you want to do and not have to worry about too much of the market side of things or the fundraising side of things. The only challenge that I see with that is, in my case, for the films that I want to make, I want to be making large blockbuster movies that would require infrastructure and millions of dollars and a distribution, a marketing team, all of that in the studio side of things. In the time being, I think I'm following your path, because I think even if you want to do the big studio films, and this is what I've learned from big directors that I've been able to work under and see them work and ask them exactly this question, everyone says you at least need to go out and find a way to make your first movie. Yeah. The same way the first money into a film is the hardest one. Making your first feature to show that you can actually do this and that you're not crazy and delusional, that's the hardest one. I think I would want to graduate into the studio system because I do love the studio system and I do love the movies that they make. Yeah. I think, and I was curious to see what your take was. In everything that I hear and read about indie filmmaking, everyone is like shitting on the studios. And the studios are always the big monster that ruins all creativity in the whole world. I completely disagree with that. The feature films and the TV shows that I've been able to work on for big studios as a production assistant or office assistant or location manager, location scout, which has been the positions that I've been able to play in big studio projects. Whenever I did those jobs, I was always amazed at the amount of freedom, flexibility that the studios were allowing the creatives.